The Galactic Academy of Studies was the biggest school in the known universe. Students came from over 200 planets to learn about other species. The academy floated in space, far from any star, and it was the size of a small moon. Millions of students lived there, studied there, and learned to understand creatures very different from themselves. This year something new happened. The academy welcomed its first human teacher. Professor Park was a small man by any standard. He stood 5 feet and 8 inches tall, which was average for a human but tiny compared to most alien species. He had gray hair, kind eyes behind simple glasses, and a gentle smile that never seemed to leave his face. He wore a plain brown suit and carried a worn leather bag filled with notes and research papers. On his first day, he walked into Lecture Hall 7. This was the biggest classroom in the biology department. It could hold 3,000 students. Today, it was filled with. They were the most feared warriors in the galaxy. They stood 8 feet tall, sometimes taller. Their bodies were covered in scales that shined like precious metals. These scales were harder than the strongest steel. Their arms numbered 4, each one ending in claws that could cut through ship armor like paper. Their eyes were large and compound, able to see in complete darkness. Their teeth were sharp enough to bite through bone. For 500 years, no species had won a war against them. They had conquered 17 star systems. Their warriors were legends. Their generals were nightmares. And now 300 of their young warriors sat in a classroom, looking down at a tiny human who was supposed to teach them about biology. Professor Park set his bag on the desk and looked up at his students. They filled every seat, row after row of massive scaled bodies. Some of them were already laughing. The sound was like rocks grinding together. A young in the front row leaned forward. His scales were black and shiny, marking him as nobility. His name was, and his father was the high commander of all military forces, was the biggest student in the class. He was also the proudest. So, said, his voice deep and rumbling, the academy sends us a human to teach us about life and death. He looked at his classmates and they laughed again. Tell me, little professor, what can you possibly teach thee about survival? Professor Park did not seem bothered by the question. He simply nodded and began unpacking his bag. That is a fair question, he said. His voice was calm and quiet, but somehow it carried through the entire hall. What do you know about Earth? Shrugged his massive shoulders. Enough. It is a small planet, blue and green. Your species has no natural weapons. No claws, no scales, no venom. You are soft and weak. Your largest predators are big cats and sharks, yes. Impressive for such a small world, but nothing that would threaten a child. The other students made sounds of agreement. Professor Park finished setting up his desk. He placed a small glass box on it, but from the students' seats, they could not see what was inside. You are correct about many things, the professor said. Humans have no claws, we have no scales, our skin is soft and tears easily. Our bones break without much force. We cannot run very fast. We cannot see in the dark. By all logical measures, we should have died out millions of years ago. He looked up at the class with his gentle smile. And yet here I am. Snorted. Yes, because you developed technology, tools and weapons to make up for your weakness. This is not impressive. Many species have done the same. True, Professor Park agreed. But let me ask you something. Why do you think we needed to develop that technology in the first place? The question seemed to confuse the young warrior. Because you were weak. You just said so yourself. Yes, but weak compared to what? The professor began walking slowly around his desk. You see, young, humans did not evolve alone on Earth. We evolved alongside millions of other species, and many of those species were very, very good at killing things. He stopped and looked directly at the noble, including things much bigger and stronger than us. For the first time, some of the students stopped laughing. There was something in the professor's voice that made them uncomfortable. It was not fear. It was not anger. it was something worse. It was certainty. Today's lesson, Professor Park announced, is about venomous creatures. Specifically, we will discuss the venomous creatures of Earth. I have brought a specimen to show you. He gestured to the small glass box on his desk. Please bring the display screen online. A young human woman stepped out from a side door. She was Professor Park's assistant, a graduate student studying how alien bodies worked. She was small like the professor, with long black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She carried a tablet computer and looked completely calm despite being surrounded by hundreds of giant warriors. Touched her tablet, and a large holographic screen appeared above the professor's desk. On the screen was a picture of something small and black, with 8 legs and many eyes. This, Professor Park said, is the Sydney funnel-web spider. It is found in a region of Earth called Australia. The females grow to about 35 millimeters in length. That is a little more than 1 inch. He held up his thumb and finger to show the size. The lecture hall exploded with laughter. An insect, one student shouted. You brought us an insect. It is not an insect, the professor corrected patiently. It is an arachnid, and this tiny creature could kill every single one of you. The laughter died instantly. Professor Park smiled his gentle smile. Now I have your attention. The silence in the lecture hall lasted only a few seconds, then stood up from his seat. His scales had changed color, shifting from black to an angry red. This meant extreme insult. You dare mock us. His voice was loud enough to shake the walls. They have conquered star systems. We have crushed armies. We have fought the devouring swarms of Nexus 7, creatures that ate entire planets. And you stand there and tell us that a bug smaller than my claw could kill us. He slammed one of his massive fists against his desk. The metal bent under the impact. Professor Park did not step back. He did not look afraid. He simply adjusted his glasses and spoke in that same calm voice. 17. Paused what? 17 warriors died during the first contact expedition to Earth. Do you know how they died? The young noble's scales flickered with uncertainty. They died in combat, fighting human soldiers. No, Professor Park shook his head slowly. Not one of them died in combat. All 17 died from allergic reactions to grass pollen. Common earth grass, the kind that grows in parks and gardens, released tiny particles into the air. Those particles entered the warriors' breathing systems. Their bodies could not handle it. They suffocated within minutes. The hall had gone completely quiet. Your scales are impressive, the professor continued. They can stop bullets, they can resist plasma fire, but they have gaps. Your joints must move so they cannot be fully covered. Your eyes must see so they cannot be armored. Your mouths must breathe and eat so they remain soft inside. He walked to the glass box on his desk and tapped it gently. The funnel web spider has fangs that are sharp and strong. They can pierce leather. They can pierce the soft spots between scales. Sat down slowly. His scales were no longer red. They had faded to a pale gray, the color of uncertainty. Tell us about this venom, he said quietly. Professor Park nodded too. She touched her tablet and the holographic display changed. Now it showed complex diagrams of molecules and nerve systems. The funnel web spider produces a venom called Delta, explained. Her voice was clear and professional. This venom attacks the nervous system. It causes nerves to fire without control. Muscles lock up. Hearts beat too fast. Lungs stop working. In humans, death can come in 15 minutes without medicine. She changed the display again. Now it showed a diagram of anatomy. We studied your species' medical records from the Galactic database. Your nervous system is different from ours in many ways, but in one important way, it is very similar. It uses the same basic chemical signals to send messages through the body. Looked at the class with an expression that might have been pity. We ran computer tests using this information. The results were very clear. Nerves are actually more sensitive to this venom than human nerves. Your warrior bodies, designed to react quickly in combat, would spread the venom faster than a human body would. A student in the middle rows raised a shaking claw. His name was, and he was younger than most of his classmates. How much faster? In a human, said, death from funnel web venom takes 15 minutes to 3 days, depending on the bite location and the person's health. Based on our tests, death would occur in approximately 8 minutes, maybe less. The hall filled with murmuring. Some students were talking to each other in worried voices. Others sat frozen in their seats, staring at the tiny glass box on the professor's desk. His voice cut through the noise. These are just computer tests, numbers on a screen, they prove nothing. Professor Park smiled. You are right, computer tests can be wrong, that is why I brought a live specimen. He gestured to the glass box. For the first time, the students could see movement inside. Something small and dark was crawling across the bottom of the container. Would you like a demonstration? The murmuring stopped. Every eye in the hall focused on the professor. You cannot be serious, said. You would not risk killing a student to prove a point. Of course not. Professor Park seemed almost offended by the suggestion. I would never harm any of you, but the Academy's medical department has provided us with something useful. Disappeared through the side door and returned pushing a small cart. On the cart was a larger container filled with a strange liquid. Floating in the liquid was a piece of tissue about the size of a human hand. This is synthetic tissue, she explained. It was grown in the Academy's medical labs from donated cells. It contains working nerve clusters that are identical to living nervous tissue. It will react to stimuli exactly as a living would react. She positioned the cart next to the professor's desk. When we introduce the spider's venom to this tissue, we will see exactly what would happen inside a living body. Professor Park looked up at his students. His gentle smile had not changed, but there was something serious in his eyes now. I want to be clear about something. I am not doing this to frighten you or to insult your species. I am doing this because knowledge saves lives. Many wish to visit Earth for trade or tourism or diplomacy. They need to understand what dangers wait for them there. He paused. And Earth has many, many dangers. He reached for the glass box containing the spider. Shall we begin? No one objected. No one could speak. 300 of the galaxy's most feared warriors sat in silence, watching a tiny human prepare to show them true fear. Word spread fast through the Academy. By the time Professor Park was ready to begin his demonstration, the lecture hall was no longer just filled with students. Scientists from other departments had come to watch. Teachers from biology, chemistry, and medicine stood along the walls. Representatives from 12 different species crowded the doorways. And in the very back of the hall, standing like a mountain of polished armor, was High Commander himself. He had arrived on an emergency military shuttle just 30 minutes ago. Someone had sent him a message about what was happening. The supreme leader of all forces had traveled across 3 star systems to see this demonstration with his own eyes. Professor Park noticed the High Commander enter. He bowed his head in respect but showed no fear. Welcome, Commander. You honor us with your presence. Did not respond. He simply crossed his 4 massive arms and waited. Had prepared everything carefully. The synthetic tissue sample was now displayed on a larger platform where everyone could see it. Holographic screens around the room showed close-up views of the tissue. Medical monitors displayed the nerve activity inside it, showing steady pulses of electrical signals. The tissue is alive, announced. Nerve activity is normal and stable. It will respond to the venom exactly as a living subject would respond. Professor Park put on a pair of thick gloves. He picked up a special tool, a long metal stick with soft grips at the end. Slowly and carefully, he opened the glass container. The spider inside was not large. It was black and shiny, with thick front legs and a body smaller than a human thumb. It moved quickly, raising its front legs in a threat display when the container opened. The funnel web spider is naturally aggressive, the professor explained as he worked. It does not run from threats, it attacks them. This is unusual for spiders, which usually prefer to hide or escape. He guided the spider onto the tissue sample with the tool. The creature crawled across the synthetic flesh, its 8 legs moving in quick, jerky motions. For a moment, nothing happened. The spider explored its new environment, seemingly confused by the strange surface beneath it. Then it bit. The reaction was immediate and terrible. Every monitor in the room went wild. The nerve activity display, which had shown calm and regular pulses, suddenly exploded with chaotic signals. The tissue sample itself began to move, twitching and shaking as if it were in horrible pain. "Full neural cascade beginning," reported, her voice somehow staying calm. "The venom is spreading through the nerve clusters at approximately 3 times the rate we see in human tissue." On the screens, the students could see what was happening inside the synthetic flesh. The venom was attacking the nerves like fire spreading through dry grass. Every nerve it touched began firing uncontrollably, sending desperate signals to nowhere. The tissue sample was shaking violently now. If it had been attached to a body, that body would have been having a massive seizure. 30 seconds since initial contact, said. Nerve clusters in the primary injection zone are beginning to fail. Professor Park had returned the spider to its container. He stood watching the monitors with a sad expression on his face. "In a living," he said quietly, "this would be the point where the victim would lose control of their arms and legs. They would fall to the ground. They would be unable to speak or call for help." 1 minute passed. The shaking of the tissue sample became less violent, but not because the venom was stopping. The nerves were dying. 2 minutes, announced. 60% neural failure. In a living subject, major organs would now be shutting down. 3 minutes. The tissue sample barely moved at all now. The monitors showed only scattered, weak signals. 4 minutes. 90% neural failure. Cardiac arrest would have occurred by now in a living subject. At 5 minutes and 12 seconds, the last nerve cluster went dark. The monitors showed flat lines. The tissue sample was completely still. "Complete neural death," said. "Time from initial bite to total system failure, 5 minutes and 12 seconds. The lecture hall was silent. 300 warriors, dozens of scientists, and one high commander stood in absolute shock. The spider in its container was cleaning its fangs, unconcerned with the death it had just caused. High Commander moved through the crowd. The other observers quickly stepped aside for him. He walked all the way to the front of the hall and stood before the professor's desk, looking down at the tiny creature in its glass box. "This small thing," he said slowly, "could kill a warrior." "Yes, Commander." "In 5 minutes." "Yes, Commander. Actually, we believe a living subject might die even faster. The synthetic tissue cannot produce the stress hormones that a living body would create. Those hormones might accelerate the venom spread." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that everyone was thinking. "How many of these creatures exist on your world?" Professor Park exchanged a glance with before answering. "The funnel web spider. There are approximately 40 different species in Australia alone, millions of individual spiders. They live in gardens, in forests, sometimes in houses. Humans encounter them regularly." "And you survive these encounters?" "Usually. We have developed anti-venom, medicine that stops the poison from killing us. We teach our children from a young age to recognize dangerous creatures and avoid them. We have learned to live alongside these things." The High Commander looked at the professor with new eyes. For the first time in his long military career, he was looking at a human not as a small, weak creature, but as something else entirely. "Professor," said carefully, "you said the funnel web is found in Australia. Does this mean it is the only dangerous creature on your world?" Professor Park's gentle smile returned, but now there was something almost apologetic about it. "Commander, I should tell you something. The funnel web spider is not even close to being the most dangerous creature on Earth. In fact, on the scale of things that can kill humans, it is somewhere in the middle." Scales went completely white. "There are worse things." "Many worse things," the professor nodded slowly. "Would you like to hear about them?" 1 week after the demonstration at the Academy, the Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. This was not a normal meeting. Every species with a seat on the council was required to attend. No exceptions were allowed. The council chamber was a massive sphere floating in the center of a space station. Hundreds of platforms circled the inside of the sphere, each one holding delegates from a different species. Warriors sat next to insect-like creatures from distant stars. Water-dwelling beings floated in special tanks next to beings made of living crystal. At the center of the sphere, on the main speaking platform, stood Ambassador Lee. He was an older human man with a calm face and silver hair. He had spent 40 years representing Earth to the galaxy. He had negotiated peace treaties and trade agreements. He had smiled and bowed and acted humble in front of species that could crush him like an insect. Today he was not smiling. Behind him, a holographic image of Earth rotated slowly. It was a beautiful planet, blue and green and white with clouds. It looked peaceful and gentle. Red dots began appearing on the image. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Each dot marked a location where something deadly lived. "Distinguished delegates," Ambassador Lee began, "for 20 years Earth has been open to visitors from across the galaxy. We have welcomed tourists, scientists, diplomats, and traders. We have been proud to share our world with the galactic community." He paused and looked around the chamber. In that time, 47 alien visitors have died on Earth, not from violence, not from accidents, not from disease. They died from encounters with our wildlife. The chamber was silent. "Until now, we have treated these deaths as unfortunate accidents. We provided warnings. We offered guides. We thought this was enough." Ambassador Lee shook his head slowly. "The recent demonstration at the Academy showed us that we were wrong. The galactic community does not understand what Earth really is." He gestured to the rotating planet behind him. "Earth is what scientists call a death world. This means it is a planet where life evolved under extreme conditions: heavy gravity, intense radiation, constant environmental changes. On such worlds, life must become very good at two things: killing and not being killed." The red dots on the Earth image began to pulse. These marks show locations where creatures dangerous to alien life can be found. As you can see, they cover almost the entire planet. There is almost nowhere on Earth that is truly safe. He touched a control, and the image changed to show a small cone-shaped shell sitting on the ocean floor. This is the cone snail. It is found in warm ocean waters. It hunts by shooting a small dart filled with venom. This venom can kill a human in minutes. We have identified over 800 species of cone snail. Many of them are deadly. The image changed to show something that looked like a floating bag of clear jelly, with long trailing strings beneath it. This is the box jellyfish. It lives in the waters near Australia. Its tentacles can reach 3 meters long. Contact with these tentacles causes immediate heart failure in humans. The jellyfish is nearly invisible in water. Swimmers often do not see it until they have already touched it. Another image appeared. This one showed a tiny octopus covered in bright blue rings. The blue-ringed octopus. It fits in the palm of a human hand. It carries enough venom to kill 26 adult humans. There is no medicine that can stop this venom. If you are bitten, you will die. The only treatment is to keep the victim breathing with machines until the venom wears off naturally. This can take 24 hours. Ambassador Lee continued for over an hour. He showed them snakes that could kill with a single bite, fish that shot poison spines, frogs whose skin was covered in deadly toxins, insects whose stings caused days of agony. Then he showed them the plants. The tree, he said, displaying an image of a large-leafed plant that looked completely harmless, also called the suicide plant. Its leaves are covered in tiny hairs filled with poison. If you touch these leaves, you will experience pain that has been described as being burned with acid while being shocked with electricity. This pain can last for months, sometimes years. People have killed themselves rather than continue living with this pain. The delegate from the collective, a species of empathic beings who could sense emotions, suddenly collapsed. They had felt the emotional echo of that pain through the ambassador's memories and could not handle it. Medical teams rushed to help them. Ambassador Lee waited until the delegate was taken away before continuing. I am not telling you these things to frighten you. I am telling you because you need to understand something about humanity. He turned to face the section directly. High Commander sat there in his ceremonial armor, surrounded by his generals. You have asked many times how such a weak species as humans came to dominate their world. You have wondered how we spread across every continent, every climate, every environment on Earth. You have called us soft and fragile and wondered how we survived it all. The ambassador spread his arms to indicate the image of Earth behind him. This is how we survived by learning. Every creature I have shown you today we studied. We learned its habits. We learned its weaknesses. We learned how to avoid it, how to treat its venom, how to live in its territory without dying. He lowered his arms. We did not survive Earth by being the strongest. We survived by being the most adaptable, the most careful, the most willing to learn. High Commander stood slowly. His voice carried across the chamber. Ambassador, I must ask, if Earth is so dangerous, why do humans not simply destroy these creatures? You have the technology. You could make your world safe. Ambassador Lee smiled for the first time since his speech began. Commander, those creatures are part of our world. They were there long before we were. Many of them are beautiful and fascinating. Scientists spend entire careers studying them. Some humans even keep dangerous animals as pets because they find them interesting. He shook his head. We do not want to destroy them. We have learned to live with them. That is what humans do. We adapt. We learn. We find ways to survive alongside things that want to kill us. He looked around the chamber one final time. And perhaps that is the most important lesson Earth can teach the galaxy. 6 months had passed since Ambassador Lee's speech to the Galactic Council. In that time, everything had changed. The Academy now required all students to complete a course called Terran Hazard Awareness before they could graduate. Professor Park had been promoted to department head, with a staff of 20 human instructors under his command, had received her advanced degree and now taught her own classes. The course was the most popular in the entire academy. Students from every species wanted to learn about the death world called Earth. They wanted to understand how humans had survived there. They wanted to know every creature that could kill them. But more than that, they wanted to understand humans themselves. Still attended Professor Park's lectures. The proud warrior had changed in the months since that first demonstration. His scales no longer turned red with anger when humans spoke. Instead, they often shifted to soft blues and greens, colors that meant curiosity and respect. On this particular evening, sat in the professor's office. The room was small and crowded with books and specimen jars. Strange plants from Earth grew in pots by the window. A terrarium in the corner contained several funnel web spiders, now used for educational purposes only. I have been thinking, said slowly, about what makes humans different from us. Professor Park looked up from the papers he was grading. Oh, and what conclusions have you reached? The way is to be strong. We grow harder scales. We sharpen our claws. We make ourselves into better weapons. When we face an enemy, we destroy it. This has been our way for 1,000 generations. He paused, his large eyes focused on the spider terrarium. But humans are not like this. You are soft. Your bodies have no weapons. Yet you spread across a world that tried to kill you every single day. You did not destroy the things that threatened you. You learned to live with them. Professor Park set down his pen. Is that so strange? It is completely strange, admitted. I would never do this. If we found funnel web spiders on our home world, we would burn every forest to destroy them. We would poison every hole where they might hide. We would not rest until every single one was dead. And then we would be safe. The professor nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps, or perhaps you would find that destroying the spiders caused other problems. Perhaps the spiders ate insects that spread disease. Perhaps without the spiders, those insects would multiply and cause a plague. Perhaps by destroying one threat, you would create a worse one. Scales flickered with uncertainty. I had not considered this. Ecology is complicated. Everything is connected to everything else. Humans learned this lesson long ago, sometimes through painful mistakes. Professor Park stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. We tried to destroy wolves once in some parts of Earth. The wolves were killing our livestock, so we hunted them until they were almost gone. What happened? Without wolves to hunt them, deer populations exploded. The deer ate all the plants. Without plants, the soil washed away. Rivers changed their paths. Entire ecosystems collapsed. We had to bring the wolves back to fix what we had broken. Was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. They have conquered 17 star systems. We have never lost a war. We are the strongest species in the galaxy. His voice was not proud as he said this. It was thoughtful, almost sad. But we have never learned to live with anything. We only know how to destroy. Professor Park turned back to face his student. That is not entirely true. You are here, learning. Your people sent you to this academy to understand other species. That is not destruction. That is adaptation. Perhaps, stood, his massive form filling the small office. I should let you return to your work, Professor, but I wanted to tell you something first. What is that? When I first saw you, standing in that lecture hall, I laughed. I thought you were weak and foolish. I thought humans were a joke species that had somehow stumbled into space. His scales shifted to a deep purple, a color that used to show respect. I was wrong. Humans are the most frightening species I have ever encountered, not because you are strong or deadly, but because you looked at a world full of things that could kill you, and instead of running or fighting, you chose to understand. He placed one massive clawed hand over his chest in a gesture of honor. My father, the High Commander, has ordered all military officers to study human history and culture. He believes we have much to learn from you. I believe he is right. Professor Park bowed his head in return. Thank you, but I think both our species have things to learn from each other. The galaxy is very large, and there are threats out there that neither of us has faced yet. Perhaps when we face them, we will face them together. Scales brightened to a warm gold. I would like that, Professor. I would like that very much. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Professor, one more question. Yes. You mentioned in your last lecture that Earth has an animal called a platypus. You said it is venomous, lays eggs, produces milk, has the bill of a bird and the tail of a beaver, and somehow is also a mammal. Professor Park smiled his gentle smile. Yes, that is correct. Is this animal real, or were you testing to see if we were paying attention? The professor laughed softly. It is completely real. Would you like to see one? Scales went pale gray again. "On Earth," he said slowly, "there is always something more terrifying waiting around the corner, isn't there?" "Always," Professor Park agreed, "but that is what makes it home." Through the window, Earth was not visible. It was far away, a tiny blue dot among billions of stars. But somewhere in the galaxy, humans were living their lives alongside box jellyfish and funnel web spiders and suicide plants. They were swimming in oceans filled with creatures that could kill them. They were walking through forests where death hid under every leaf. And they were not afraid, because fear was just another thing humans had learned to live with.